Turn with me to John chapter 11. And what we're talking about and what we're going to talk about is the resurrection and what that has to do with us. It's not just a doctrine. It's not a doctrine when Jesus is going to come. It's not that he's resurrected back then, but we're still dealing with that. It has a lot to do with us today. Now, here's what it has to do with us. You stay in the fight. You may be wounded, you may be hurt, but you stay in the fight. Don't you give up. Satan is going to come and he's going to tell us, you're not worthy, you've got all this sin, you've done this has happened to you, and we just get so covered up with guilt and we get so covered up with fear that we just completely drop out. Never let Satan tell you that you're not worthy to be in the fight. You may be wounded, but stay in the fight. You're about to see an illustration of what happens when fear or guilt takes over and wraps us up. Are you ready? Okay, do it.
Go see if you can move. And walk.
Can
You
we
walk?
turn it off?
No. You walk?
Give it a try.
All right.
Walk.
Now can you walk?
Oh, now she can.
All right.
She was trying very hard, but when you suck all the air out, you can't move. Okay,
They did that to my legs the other day. That's amazing. You can't.
When Satan wraps us up with guilt, and when he wraps us up with fear, we become totally immobilized. We can't move. We can't go anywhere. Now, this story that you're about to hear, we're about to read, and we're about to study, is where Christ comes back and he tells us no matter what in the world is going on, no matter how much confusion there is around you, you keep doing what you're supposed to do. Because what fear does and what guilt does is it takes us completely out of the fight, completely immobilizes us until there's nobody left. Every one of us is filled with sin. Every single one of us. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. What we're about to read today, Mary, Martha, Lazarus, is a story about us. This is a story about our own personal resurrection. However, we have a coming resurrection where we're actually going to get a new body. But that resurrection affects us even right now and even today. We're going to start a series this morning. It's the Easter series. It's Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and me. And we're about to read about a story that has to do with resurrection. Jesus is going to do it about 3 weeks before he dies and is resurrected. He's going to teach us what his resurrection has to do with us. And it gets very, very, very personal. Today, we're going to study a personal appreciation of resurrection. As we go through the resurrection for the next month, and as we study Jesus' resurrection, it gets real personal for us. And this is a story about the appreciation of a personal resurrection. Start with me in verse 1. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, right outside of Jerusalem, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. Jesus is just right across the river from them, across the Jordan River in Perea. He's only a few miles away, and they send to him, and they say, the one whom you love, your best friend, Lazarus, is sick. Every time Jesus came to Jerusalem, this is the house he stayed in. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Mary and her sister and Lazarus. Would you underline that, verse 5? He loved them. He loves you. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you're going to go there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then the disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. King James says, Lord, if he sleeps, he does well. These guys are tired and they are exhausted. They've been following Jesus for 3.5 years. They don't have time to eat. They don't have the time to sleep. And Jesus tells them, my best friend is asleep. And they think, well, thank God for him. I hope I get the same kind of rest. That's good. However, Jesus spoke of his death, spoke of Lazarus' death. But they thought that he was speaking to them about taking a rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Now, can't you imagine this? This is one of Jesus' best friends, maybe his best friend, Lazarus. And he tells them, I'm glad Lazarus is dead. And they think, wow, that's kind of weird. Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, well, let us also go that we may die with him. Have you ever felt that way? Well, I love Jesus, and we're going to follow Jesus, and I'm probably going to die with him. All right, let's look at the first point that I think God's trying to teach us here. He hasn't come yet. We've asked him to come. We've prayed that he'd come. His best friend sent word. He's just right over the river. He's just across the river. He's right there. We know where he is. And they sent word and they asked Jesus, Lord, would you come? Our brother's very sick and he's about to die. And he doesn't come. Now we know where Jesus is. He's just right across the river. He's right there in heaven, and we can talk to him anytime we want to, and we believe in him. He is God. And sometimes when we experience this stuff, and we go through these hardships, and we say, Lord, we've got to have you right now. We need you right now. And if you don't show up, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. He didn't show up. Now, point number one, he hasn't come yet, question mark? Well, what, is he not hear us? Does he not care? Why is he waiting? I wonder if it's something I did. Maybe he's not answering my prayers. Maybe he's not listening. I know he's able, and I know he's God, and he tells us to ask, and he says that he'll answer, so why hasn't he answered? You know what the hardest part of, you know what the hardest part of anything is? Waiting. Have you ever told your kids or your grandkids that you're going to take them to Chuck E. Cheese? Now, a whole bunch of my grandchildren are boys, and they're short. And I take them to Chuck E. Cheese a lot, but you never tell them ahead of time. Okay, so what's the hardest part? They're looking so forward to going to Chuck E. Cheese, and you tell them ahead of time, we're going to Chuck E. Cheese. What's the hardest part for those little guys in that? Oh, it's the waiting. Oh, drives you crazy. And they're always asking me, is it time? One of them, I won't tell you which one of them, hangs on my leg and he follows me around. He goes, is it time yet, Papa? If you don't let go of that, let me alone. We do the same thing with Jesus. He tells us, I'm coming back and everything is going to be wonderful and we're going to bring heaven to earth. And we keep saying, Lord, is it time yet? And we should. We're looking forward to that time. Okay, now here's what Jesus tells them. Verse 4, in your waiting, the waiting's the hardest part. In your waiting, it's not a permanent situation. This sickness is not unto death. This is not going to be a permanent situation. This is just temporary while we wait. God has told us He's coming back. He's going to resurrect us from the dead. He's going to resurrect from the dead. While we wait, this is not a permanent situation. It is, verse 4, it is for the glory of God. God's going to be glorified through this. Now, we're going to have to ask, how is God going to be glorified by me having to wait and going crazy? Now, you just watch for this just a minute because we're going to answer this question. He's going to answer it. This is going to be for the glory of God. Well, how in the world is that going to be possible? So just hang on to that question. That the Son of God may be glorified through Him. All right, now look at verse 5. What does that say? He loved me. He loves you. He loves us. He loves us so much that He comes and He stays at our house. He loves us. And He loves you. Don't ever forget that. Now, what we're going to be talking about is how is God glorified through this as we wait. As we go through this confusion, and as we go through this pain, and as we go through this darkness that we do not understand, how is God going to be glorified through this, and how in the world can He use this? We've had several people in the hospital in the last few weeks. I mean, serious stuff. We had a funeral here a week and a half ago at this. How is God going to use that? And what do you do in the midst of this waiting and this confusion and this darkness? He says, well, I'm going to be glorified. And we think, okay, God, we want you glorified, but how? Verse 15. Why do we have to wait? And why do we have to go through this? Lazarus is dead. Starting in verse 15, I'm glad for your sake that I was not here. I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to Him. Now, why are we having to wait? Why did Jesus just come back, and why are we having to go through all this stuff? Well, here's the reason. That others might believe. There's still a lot of people out there that's got to be saved. There's some people very close to you, and there's some family members and people you love that still need Jesus. They still need to believe, that others might believe. Now let's take a look at this in verse 15. He said that you might believe. Then Thomas said, well, let's go die with him. Okay. Jesus came. In verse 17, Jesus came. And He found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem. It's about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Now, Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met Him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. There's coming a last resurrection. There's coming a time at the end. Your brother's going to rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he's going to rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I'm not talking about the resurrection at the last day right now. Right now, I'm talking about the resurrection now. How does that affect us now? I know that there's going to be a resurrection at the last day. I believe that with all my heart. It's going to happen. Jesus is going to come back with all the holy angels, and he's going to come back with all those that have died before us with a great army, and he's going to ride on a great horse, and there's going to be a trumpet and a shout. And I know that we're going to resurrect from the dead. But how does that help us now? Jesus is going to talk to her about that. Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and me. Because we go through exactly what they're going through. Now let's talk about what they went through for just a minute. How long has Lazarus been in the grave? 4 days. That means for 4 days, Lazarus has been dead. That means that before that, they had to wait on Jesus and he didn't come. And she meets him and she said, Lord, if you'd have answered our prayers and you'd have come, he wouldn't have died. I believe that with all my heart. Why didn't you come? Do you know the confusion they went through? And the pain they went through? And the hurt? And the darkness? You know what the apostles went through when Jesus died? You know what you've gone through when somebody you love has died, or when somebody came close to dying, or when you've been up in the hospital this last week and you've been very, very sick, and you know the confusion, and you've got the kids running around the house and they're saying, what's the matter with Daddy? You say, well, I think he's going to be all right. They say, well, when can we see him? And they say, well, when he gets all right. And they figure out right quick that everything's not all right, and we have to live in this world just like this. And Easter is the time of resurrection. But we're not just looking forward to that resurrection that's coming. We're looking forward to how the resurrection helps us now. Jesus says in verse 25, I am the resurrection. She says in verse 24, I know that he will rise again in the last day resurrection. And Jesus said, wait. I am, right now, I am the resurrection and the life. And he who believes in me. Remember we're talking about that word belief? Other people have to believe. Why is God waiting? Why is Jesus waiting? What's the deal? Why are we having to wait for that last resurrection? And he says, well, because there's other people still out there that have to believe. He said, he who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. Verse 26, and whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this now? And she said, yes, Lord, I believe. Verse 40, Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe? Verse 42, I know that you always hear me that Jesus is praying, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Verse 45, many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. Now, why is Jesus waiting? Why is he taking so long, and why do we have to go through this, and why all the confusion? And we just do not know. We don't understand it. It is darkness. It is confusion. Especially, you know what I'm talking about if you've had to go through this. And you think, oh my, does he not care? Did he not hear me? Where is he? He is, and he's coming back. But I want to tell you right now, he's here right now through the Holy Spirit. Now, what Satan does as we go through this, is he wraps us up in this big black bag right up to your neck. And he sucks all the air completely out of you. And he tells you Jesus probably doesn't love you. Jesus probably doesn't care. He tells you this may not even be real. He told those apostles when Jesus died and they're in that room and they've got all the doors locked and they're so afraid that they can't even come out of the house, and Satan tells those apostles, this probably wasn't even real. And he sucks all the air right out of us where we can't even move. In that black bag of fear, grief, guilt. Okay, now here's what he's going to be teaching us today. Listen to this. Because of the resurrection, we can stay in the fight. You may be wounded, you may be hurt, and you may be confused. But you stay in the fight. Don't you quit praying. Because what he really wants you to do, Satan wants you to do more than anything else, is to quit. To stop praying. To stop ministering. Just to completely drop out. You're going to see Mary and Martha in their confusion and in their hurt and in their pain. Many, many people are going to get saved because they stayed in the fight. Now, Satan's going to come along and he's going to tell you, oh, no. Now, what, why, and what does the resurrection do for us? It puts our eyes on Jesus, and it gives us the hope that we need to have. And when everything else is dark and all the lights are gone out, we just keep looking at Jesus. All right, others still have to believe, Jesus said. But number 3, while you're waiting, what do you do? Starting in verse 28, while you're waiting. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher's come and is calling for you. Now, where's Mary? What's she doing? She's pouting. She's mad. She's not moving. She's not going to trust in Jesus. He should have come. She's just over there sitting. Martha goes to her, and what does Martha do? What does Martha do? Doesn't she encourage her? Is Martha hurting as bad as Mary's hurting? Yes. What does Martha do? She's coming to encourage. Even in her pain, she does not understand why Jesus didn't come. She tells him so. But she's not out of the fight yet. She comes to Mary and she said, hey, Jesus is here and he's calling for you. Now, verse 29, as soon as she heard that, what did she do? She got back in the fight. She arose quickly and she came to him. Now, Jesus had not yet come into the town, but he was in the place where Martha met him. And then the Jews who were with them in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, they followed her, saying, she's going to the tomb to weep there. That's not what she was going to do. Where's Mary going? She's going to meet Jesus. Now, how does this affect the other people that are there? They get up and follow her, do they not? You may be hurt and you may be completely confused and you don't know what in the world is going on, and you've asked him and you're waiting and you are wounded, but you stay in the fight. She got up and she went where Jesus was, and who came with her? Everybody around her. Everybody around her. And we're going to see in just a minute, everybody around her got saved because she stayed in it. Because Mary and Martha stayed in it, because Martha stayed in it. Now, while you're waiting, what do you do? What do you do? I want to show you a verse. I want you to mark this spot. We're going to come right back to it. But I want you to go with me to 2 Samuel 24:25. 2 Samuel. Long ways over in the Old Testament. 2 2 Samuel 24. Verse 25. It's the last verse in 2 Samuel. It's talking about King David. You think King David was ever wounded? You think he was ever hurt? You think he ever questioned God? Well, you ought to read the Psalms if you don't think he ever questioned God. My God, why have you forsaken me? I don't understand this darkness. Here's what David says. David built there an altar to the Lord, and he offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. He worshiped. So the Lord heard the prayers for his land, and the plague was withdrawn from Israel. Now listen to this. This is the last story of David. It's the last verse. David worships. Did David ever suffer anything? Did David ever sin? Did David ever rebel against God? Did God ever deal with it? Oh, yes, he did. But who's the one responsible for keeping Israel to following God? David, who's a picture of Jesus. He just never quit the fight. He was wounded. He was hurt. He questioned God. He didn't know what was going on. There was darkness. He sinned. And the devil comes to him and he tells him, full of guilt, it's all your fault. But verse 25, he never did get out of the fight. The Lord heard the prayers for the land. What's David been praying for? His nation, his people, his church. And the plague was withdrawn from Israel. Now that's pretty exciting. He was wounded, he was hurt, he was confused, he was in darkness, he sinned, he even rebelled, but he just never did quit praying. He just never did quit witnessing. He just never did quit fighting. He just stayed in the fight. He just kept going. He kept his eyes on Christ the whole time. God tells those kings that follow him, you've not been like my servant David, who followed me with all his heart to do that only which is right in my eyes. Now, wait a minute. How did David follow God with all his heart? Was he following God with all his heart with Bathsheba? No. Was he following God with all his heart when he censused the people and a plague came? No. So what does God mean he followed me with all his heart? You haven't been like my servant David, who followed me with all his heart to do that only which is right in my eyes. What's it talking about? David never got out of the fight. He always just kept his eyes on Christ, and even though he was confused, even though he was hurt, even though he was being chastened by the Lord sometimes, he just kept on going. In all the confusion and all the dirt, all the smoke, all the muck, he just kept moving towards God. And he kept praying for his people, and he kept praying for his nation. He kept praying for his church, and he kept praying for his family. He just never quit. Now go back with me to John. Chapter 11. While you're waiting, what are you supposed to do? Well, you stay in the fight. You keep praying. You keep witnessing. You keep leading. There's people following you. You may not know it. All right. In verse 31. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, they followed her, saying, where's she going? Well, I don't know, but I think she may be going to the tomb to weep. That wasn't where she was going. She wasn't going to the tomb to weep. Where was she going? Who'd she go meet? Well, she's going through a really, really hard time right now. Let's go with her. She's going to go grieve and she's going to go weep at the tomb. No, she's not. She's going to go where Jesus is. Listen, while you're waiting, you enjoy those around you. You lead them, you help them, you spend time with them, and you live life until you die. You just keep living. What do you do while you're waiting? You just keep living. And you keep living till you die. I saw a T-shirt the other day. I want to use it one of these days, and I will use it on the stage one of these days in one of these funerals, but I have to know the guy. I have to know the right guy. This T-shirt said, I don't want to walk up to the grave full-bodied and healthy and just step in. I want to come sliding up sideways with my body completely used up, yelling, "Yee-haw! What a ride!" Now that's what's going on right here with Lazarus. He comes sliding in sideways, and in a few moments, God's going to jerk him back out. What do you do while you're waiting? Well, number one, you just keep on believing. You just keep on praying. You just keep on going, and you stay in the fight. But number two, you enjoy life till you die. You enjoy the people that are around you, and you just use up your body serving and ministering to Jesus Christ. Verse 30, you go see Jesus. Jesus had not yet come to the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. So the Jews who were with her in the house comforted her when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, following her, saying, "Where is she going?" Where was she going? She was going to spend time with Jesus. She was going where Jesus was. Now, what she did is she poured out her heart to him. If you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. Why didn't you come? You know, it's one thing to talk to God and gripe to God, and it's another thing to gripe about God. She's over there right with Jesus face to face, looking right in the eye and griping to him. Now that's what we're supposed to do. We go where Jesus is, no matter how dark it is, no matter how much smoke it is, no matter how loud it is, no matter how confused it is. We're supposed to keep going towards Jesus, and we just keep moving towards Jesus. You can gripe to him all you want. You ought to read the Psalms, what David says to him. But he's saying it to him. He's not saying it about him. They're eyeball to eyeball. Well, verse 43. Lastly, see, while you're waiting, you believe. But lastly, 43, alive again. Now, when he'd said these things, he cried out. Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." Then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things that Jesus did believed in him. Alive again. This is a story about our personal resurrection. This isn't a story about Jesus' resurrection. He's going to die, be buried, and he's going to resurrect in about 3 weeks. But before he does that, he gives us a story about us. This is a picture of us. As we go through this and as we have to walk through this, Satan comes and he says, well, Jesus probably didn't hear you. He probably didn't care. It's probably your fault that this stuff happened and that God didn't answer your prayers. And then we're in guilt and we're in fear. Well, if he didn't answer this, I wonder if the rest of it's not true also. And he comes and he says, no. You just keep moving forward. Stay in the fight. I'm still there. You believe in me. What a marvelous Savior. That he would come and give us this picture before the resurrection, because you know what the apostles had to do 3 weeks from now? the exact same thing. You know who wasn't? According to the scriptures, it doesn't list any reference. You know who wasn't at the tomb? Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. The angel stands at the tomb and he said, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" They weren't there because they'd already experienced the living. And God gives this story for Peter, Andrew, James, and John, all the other apostles, so that when they have to walk through this exact same thing, because every single person is going to walk through this, unless Jesus comes back first, but every single one of us is going to have to walk through this. And he gives us a pattern of how to do it. This really isn't about us. This is about saving our nation. This is about saving our church. This is about saving our families. This is about saving people. We're all going to go through it. Now, how we go through it determines how many of them are going to believe. Would you bow with me, please? Lord, thank you. Thank you in the name of Christ for this story. Thank you in the name of Christ for the Word of God. And Lord, would you teach us, help us, direct us, lead us in going through this. Oh, Father, thank you. In Christ's name.